I want to talk tonight about T-types. Just an overview, and then if people have got some questions, we can get into it a little more deeply. So the post-war T-types, right after the war was over, they went right back into production. So there are 1945 TCs. The TC was maybe, I think they say it's 4 inches wider than the TB, but the TB and the TC are all but the same vehicle. Very, very few, 339, maybe something like that, TBs, but there are 10,000 TCs. The British started a campaign later on. It was referred to as export or die. England was broke. They'd gone through all the reserves. They'd lost their empire, and they owed us, the United States, an enormous amount of money. So they went to work. They went to work and earned their way out of it. Part of that was exporting cars. Part of that was exporting sports cars, and MG was at the top. MG produced more sports cars than any other company in England over that range of time. So in 1945 through 1949, we've got the TC. There are 10,000 TCs. TCs have the earlier look. The front wheels have got a real interesting camber to them. They've got just dreadful steering. They've got a Bishop Cam steering box on them, but a real powerful, real strong gearbox. So strong that it's hard to find parts for a TC gearbox because I think most of them are still not being remade. They've got 19-inch wire wheels. A lot of fun. In 1950, through the engineer Alec Isagonis, we pick up the independent front suspension and the rack and pinion steering. That's a dramatic change. They also made another dramatic change, and they went from 19-inch wire wheels to the lighter, stronger, more durable 15-inch disc wheels. And of course, everybody went nuts. And they said, wait, what about our wire wheels? We want the classic look of a sports car. And so by the TF, 1954, the factory made wire wheels available again. They were available right through 1980, even though the disc wheel is a better wheel, lighter, stronger. They made 30,000 TDs between 1950 and 1953. And then they were going to start making the MGA. But the guy who was running BMC at the time, Leonard Lord, said, I'm not going to make two cars that look exactly the same. He was talking about the Healey, the big Healey. And of course, they look kind of the same, but I didn't realize how close they truly were until I was at the MGB meet in 2017 in San Diego at Coronado. We were at a nice little hotel there. I looked across the parking lot and there was a Healey, and I thought, oh, that's interesting that there should be a Healey at an MG meet. Well, later on in the day, I walked over to it and someone had painted that round and then curved line on an MGA. It wasn't a Healey at all, it was an MGA. So Leonard Lord was right. The two cars do look the same, at least from a distance, from 65, well, no, I was 70 then, 70-year-old eyes. So they had to come up with this interim model, and so they came out with a TF. So when I got involved with MGs, the TF was like, none of the true T-typers really liked the TF. It was too modern, too rakish, too swept. But now this is 50 years later, the TF, the TF is a beautiful car, and gets a lot of interest from the T-typers. It's no longer denigrated like it once was. So they made 9,600 TFs. During the production of the TD, they thought they'd make a TD race car, something that would stand a little more abuse in the competition circuit. So they came out with a TD Mark II, and they put bigger carburetors on it, which doesn't make it run any better. but you got the advertising value of larger carburetors, same size carbs as a MGA, 1.5 inch. And then they also put on 2 fuel pumps, twice the chance of failure, right? And then they put on 4 extra shocks. There's an extra shock on each corner. So you don't need 2 shocks on each corner. Don't know why they put the shocks on there. Andrex shocks. They are so early and crude and elementary. All they are is plates of steel and plates of teak wood compressed, and they're friction shocks. So they run in 90-weight gear oil. And when they start to get a little soft, you tighten them up a little bit and they get a little stiffer. But that was the TD Mark II. I think maybe there were 2,800 of those. I'm not sure. But they carry a different number. It's called the engine carries a TD/small c, a TD competition model. There were no competition models in the TF. But in the TF, they did move the fuel pump from up underneath the bonnet, where it's really easy to work on. I fixed a fuel pump under a bonnet. I don't remember, is it TD or TF, TC? I don't remember what it was. At GeoF Central, it's really nice. You took it apart right in place and cleaned up the points and off it went. Anyway, they moved the fuel pump back down by the right rear wheel, where it stayed until 1980 with the MGB. So a few more comments about the T-types. The engine is an X series, X like X-ray. That came out as an XPAG, XPAG, X for the series, P for pushrod, A for the displacement, and G for MG. There's also an XPEG, XPEG, for the 1500 engine that was used in the TFs about halfway through the TF production. It's a fast engine for 1939 when it came out. It was a fast engine, and it still does okay. It's still really crude and elementary by today's design. Certainly by today's design, but contrasted to an MGB, it's like, why would you have the oil pump on the outside of the car so you can't change the steering? Why would you do that? Why don't you just put it inside the engine? But they eventually got that kind of sorted out. The ignition systems are the same between the TC and the TD and the TF. The number on the distributor changes. It's a 40048, I think, on a TC, and a 40162 on a TD, and I can't remember what it is on the TF. Slightly different curves for the type of car that it is. The cooling systems are all the same, except that the water pumps are the same, and the radiators are all about the same size. But in the TF, we pick up pressurized cooling system. It's only 4 pounds. It's only 4 pounds, so it isn't much. But the goal is to have the coolant boil at a higher temperature than what it would normally boil at. You get an extra 3 degrees of boiling out of every pound on the cap. Now the cap on a TF, I think, is only 4 pounds, so we're only picking up 12 more degrees, but it's something. The fuel system remains the same on the car. As I said earlier, the TFs have got 1.5-inch carburetors. The TD Mark IIs have got 1.5-inch. The rest of them have got 1.25-inch carburetors. The fuel tanks sit at the rear of the car, and the fuel tanks all look pretty much the same. There's no fuel gauge. There's only an on-off light when you've got 3 gallons or less of gasoline remaining. The clutch is the same on the TC, TD, and TF, except that partway through the TD, it goes from a 7.25-inch clutch to an 8-inch clutch, and it stays at an 8-inch clutch all the way through the end of the MGB. The gearbox, the TC gearbox, is actually stronger than the TD or TF gearbox. Very rarely is there a severe problem with a TC gearbox, but the TD TF gearbox is the same. It's got synchros built into the sliding hubs, so that the more slowly you make the gear change, the smoother and less crunchy it actually is. In marked contrast to the MGAs and MGBs later on in the midgets, later on, that if you take too much time trying to change gears, then the gears grind. You want to do it real fast in a B. Drive shaft stays about the same. The rear axle changes between the TC and the TD and TF. The TC rear axle is a bevel gear, real easy to fix, real easy to change, banjo style. And then we get the TD-TF, and you can't, for love or money, set up a TD-TF rear axle. You can't see what's going on. It's all hidden inside the case. You got to use old housings to set up the new gears if you're changing gears in your differential. But it's a hypoid diff in the TD and the TF. And the advantage of the hypoid diff is strength. So it's real easy to run the gears off in a TC, but and actually break the crown wheel. But in the TD TF, that just never happens. It's a much more durable differential. Same thing with the steering. The steering on the TC is a Bishop cam box, just crummy. You don't steer a TC, you aim it. But by the time we get to the TD TF, we've got rack and pinion steering, just dynamite. I mean, the Triumphs didn't pick up rack and pinion until, I don't know, 67, somewhere later on in there, someplace in that TR4 to TR5, TR250 change. The front suspension on the TC is a solid beam and leaf springs. It's harsh. The TD-TF is soft. It's nice. It's independent front suspension that was first brought out on the Y-type, and it remained the same front suspension virtually until 1980. I just got done doing Craig West's car, 3 weeks in the shop of working with Craig and his TD, and we had to replace the front A-arms because they were worn. And we found MGB A-arms that will take a sway bar, so we put those in. So the A-arms from a 1950 TD fit a 1980 MGB. The shocks start off as Girling shocks. They have great, huge caps on them, which are impossible to remove without taking them off the car and then heating up with an oxyacetylene torch. And of course, one of the rules of using a torch is you never heat a closed vessel. So you have to heat them up really quickly and get the top off before the pressure gets so great that you're in trouble. So those are dicey. Those are dicey to do. Later on, they go to a Armstrong shock, which is the same as an MGB or MGA. The brakes on the TC, TD, TF are all single circuit, one master cylinder, one line. The TC uses a mechanical brake light switch. The TD, TF uses a hydraulic switch. And the brakes, I maintain that the brakes on the TD and TF are better brakes than on the TC, but I don't race them, so I can't tell you for sure. But you've got 2 cylinders in the front and 1 cylinder in the back for the TD and the TF. You've only got 1 cylinder front, 1 cylinder back on the TC. The electricals are all the same. They use a lot of the same components, or can use the same components. The control box or the regulator on the TC is carried over and used on the earlier TDs. Some of the horns, the TC uses a clear hooter horn. That's a real pretty horn. The TD and TF use the Lucas wind tone horns. But other than that, it's all the same. We already talked about the wheels. That all the TCs have got wire wheels, except for one TC here in Grand Rapids, in the Grand Rapids area, that was total. It had a fire in 1949, and the people who owned it bought it back and took REO truck rims and put those on. It's a very unusual looking TC. As far as lubrication on the car goes, the engines are all the same. They take 20W50 high zinc oil. Valvoline VR1 is great. The gearboxes in all these, the T types, also takes gear oil, GL4 gear oil 8090. The differential takes GL4 8090, as does the steering box or the rack and pinion. But when you're greasing the car, don't forget to grease the pedals. The pedals have a grease zerk on them also. It's important to keep it well lubricated.
John, did you say 2050 on the oil?
What's that? Yeah, 2050. Yep, that's what I tell everybody.
John, will you repeat that last suggestion after gear oil?
The
last one.
Let's see, where was I? The gear oil in the gearbox and the differential and
something about the pedals
and the carburetors. You want to use.
Now, wait a minute. I got two people talking. All right, you got the gearbox.
Okay, so we've got the gearbox, the differential,
Yeah.
the rack and pinion.
Yeah.
But your TB has a steering box, right?
Yeah.
And then and the carburetors, they all take GL4 8090 gear oil.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And then I said, don't forget to grease the pedals. There's a grease zerk on the pedal.
The pedals. Okay. Yeah.
And make sure you put a shot of grease in that, and keep the back of the dynamo lubricated. Keep the water pump, if it's got a grease zerk on it, keep that lubricated. So the whole car is so much better when it's.
I got on that line. There are grease nipples on the wheel supports. I don't know exactly which components. And the chart I saw called for oil, not grease.
Well, in the rack and pinion, you want to put oil.
No, this is there's no record on the wheel supports.
On the TB, no, you want to use grease. NGL
Okay, all
number 2.
right, I'll get back to you on that.
All right.
John?
Yeah.
One correction, the TC takes 140 weight oil
In the gearbox.
in the gearbox and the steering box.
Excuse me. I just talked to a guy today. I said any oil is better than no oil, but the correct oil is better than any oil. So excuse me. Fred's right here, 140 weight, thicker stuff, a lot thicker stuff on the TC, on the gearbox and on the differential. Thank you.
Hey, John, the
Ask me how I know.
Okay. How do you know, Fred?
I have one.
Oh,
I rebuilt it.
all right. Okay. All right, John Uhas, you were up for a second there?
yeah, I've been looking to find the proper lubrication for the tach drive and the generator itself. Some say use 90 weight gear oil, and some say to use a light grease. Can you throw some light on that?
Well, in the tachometer drive on the back of the dynamo, the 4.3-to-1 ratio that reverses the direction of the cable and makes sure tach work correctly. That I would use just number 2 grease, NGLI number 2, or NLGI, I don't remember, National Lubrication and Grease Institute or National Grease and Lubrication Institute, NLGI, number 2 lithium grease. Used to be that there were all these different greases, one grease for this and one grease for that and everything. And wheel bearing grease, you used to take the wheel bearing grease and pull it out, and it was, oh, it'd string way out and everything. But now, because grease is better, because people have learned, because I don't know why, but now all I use for grease, the only grease I use, I don't use white grease. I use real high temp white grease sometimes with the brakes, pivot points in the brakes. But everything else, I use. In fact, I use Lucas grease, Lucas, available from Napa. Napa's. Sounds like I ought to be advertising for Napa when we're done here tonight. People say he mentioned Napa about 48 times, but yeah, that's where I buy. That's where I buy my lube. So, but I haven't bought any 140 weight there, so I don't know if they've got that or not. But Amazon's always great. I mean, you can get anything off Amazon.
How about the cotton piece that goes in? It's the armature.
That's just engine oil's fine in there. You put oil in there, and then the wick is supposed to make that oil available, and that is a sintered bronze bushing, which means the oil can creep through the bushing and keep it lubricated between the steel shaft and that bronze bushing in the back of the dynamo, just engine oil. So if you unscrew that wick and then pull the wick out with a little spring around it and put oil in there and push that back down, and you got oil all over your hands and everything, and then put some oil in the back of the dynamo and screw it all back together, that's fine.
All right, great. Thank you, John.
They drop that off later on. I mean, it's the same rear bushing on a later car, MGAs, for instance, and there is no oil around there. Although it does say at the back end of the later ones, it does say oil, and you should put your oil can into the back of the generator and give it just a glug. You don't want to over oil some of this stuff. But there's no problem. You won't be able to over-oil the T-type dynamos or generators just because of their construction.
Thank you, John.
Hey,
So
John,
lubrication, or talk about the oils.
John?
Yes,
One thing I don't think you mentioned was oiling the center shaft of the distributor.
there's a lot of places to oil. There's a lot of places to oil. So what Fred's talking about is you take the cap off the distributor, then you take the rotor off, and underneath the rotor is a screw with a hole in it. If it's a DKY4 distributor, and you can just put a couple drops of oil in there, or you can just be cautious, just with it in place, unscrew the screw in the middle. Don't lift the cam out. Don't do that. And now you're in too deep of trouble, but just pull the screw up, put a couple drops of oil in there and put the screw back in. And that keeps the cam, the distributor cam, lubricated and free from the distributor shaft. I had a customer one time, I think it was 1992, when he was going to drive to the first NAMGBR convention up in Peterborough, Ontario. And his car just would not respond. And I said, well, Jesus, seems like the distributor. He says, no, I just had that apart and serviced it all. So it's not that. I said, okay. And I gave up trying to figure out what the problem was, but he'd used Loctite to hold the screw. He'd used Loctite to hold the screw in the distributor shaft, which you don't have to. And that Loctite had run over and then frozen the advance to the distributor shaft, so he was getting no mechanical advance. So he just had a same timing from all the way from idle all the way up to 4,000 RPM, and it wasn't enough. It didn't advance enough. So,
John, I don't know if this is the same thing Fred's talking about, but I always was taught to put a dab of grease on the wiper for the points. Now, I don't have points anymore, thank goodness, but many people do, and they're a great system. But I didn't do that, and ended up on the side of the road because the little wiper, I don't know, some kind of composite thing that makes the points go open and close and open and close, broke off. And that stops you dead cold.
Yep, so you put, I usually wipe the grease on the cam lobe itself with a little acid brush and just wipe a little bit of grease on all four faces. And then as it spins around, it'll catch and roll up just a little bit on that cam rider. And if you want to be exotic, you can say, oh, that's phenolic. Sounds like you know what you're talking about. Phenolic is a plastic of some kind. But yeah, it is necessary. Yep, there's a lot of stuff you can lubricate. You can lubricate the steering column. You lubricate the handbrake cables. There's a lot of stuff to lube, and the more stuff you lube and the more stuff you exercise, the better the car will treat you. Let me tell you. So oil is your friend. I just worked on a car this weekend. The driver's door didn't shut well. And I told the owner, I said, well, get out a big Phillips, tighten up all 6 of the screws, 3 on the latch and 3 on the door jamb. And then I said, just flush the works with oil. Open and close the car about the door about 20 times. And then of course, wipe off all the oil off the door and everything. So you don't get your clothes dirty. But yeah, oil and grease are your friends.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jim Borkman. I had a question about, I'm reinstalling the axle on my TD. I had the differential upgraded to an MGA gears. So when I put the axle back in, should I grease those up a bit and then plus the oil, or just rely on the oil to grease those?
I wouldn't put them in dry. Putting a little bit of grease on them doesn't hurt anything. But it's intended that they're washed in oil. And then that oil comes down through the bearing,
Right.
washes up around the other way, and keeps the seal from drying out. So it's not necessary. You can pack them.
A little bit, yeah. Won't hurt.
Just some light oil on there is just fine.
Yeah, and of course you grease the bearings as well, so. Right? Put grease on the bearings before you put those back on.
You don't have to, just oil them. Just oil them is fine.
Okay,
So and the grease will eventually mix with the oil eventually, and then the oil will be able to get past the bearing and get around the seal to keep it lubricated.
yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So let's see, the bodies are all ash, it's all coach work. The bodies are wood and with steel stretched around them. And no two bodies are exactly the same. Anybody who finds that out knows we had one of our first restorations. The guy taken all the metal off the body, had all the metal painted, and wanted us to put the metal back on the wood without damaging the paint. And it's like a fairy tale where you got to cut down the largest tree in the forest with a herring. It is impossible. They had to have some paint touch up done afterwards. But anyway, the bodies are all pretty much the same. The rule, of course, is that if a part can be the same, it's not. And all those have got pieces of wood in them. I just ran into Craig from Novelty, Ohio.
Seabrook.
Thank you. My 75-year-old brain, Craig Seabrook from Novelty, Ohio, is still doing wood, providing wood and providing wood to our major suppliers. So he's got good stuff. He's just been doing it forever. So even if you buy new pieces of wood, they don't fit. It's a starting point. So you have to carefully assemble the stuff with screws. You don't glue it. So it can move and then shape it so that the metal fits on top correctly. I wanted to talk about some of the clubs that you can belong to if you have a T-type. So in this country, of course, it's the New England MGT register. And as I said in my constant contact note, there's power in numbers and there are efficiencies in scale. So support the New England MGT register. They need you and you need them. They've got a great magazine. Dave Lawley does the magazine. I just saw him this weekend. It's a beautiful magazine, and there's all kinds of technical stuff in there, and you can order past technical information on CDs, or God knows it's some other media now, but all this stuff's available. So anyway, that's the club here in the United States that handles the T-types. If you want to go to England and belong to a T-type club, of course, you can belong to the MG Car Club, MG Owners Club, either of those. But the Octagon Car Club, octagoncarclub.co.uk, probably something like that, is operational in England. And it's a great group of guys, but they won't sell parts to you in the United States. So you have to get them by a different way. You got to get somebody who will get them from the car club and then send them to you. Something about liability. I don't know if they got jammed up one time or somebody explained some terrible thing that some other person had happened to them, or I don't know, lawsuit, or I have no idea. But they won't send parts here, which is too bad because they have a great supply of parts. But you can always find somebody who'll do that for you. The suppliers in this country, of course, there's Moss. There's always Moss. Moss is the Goliath in the industry, of course. And then there is Abingdon Spares. So many years ago, that was run by Jerry Gogan, who was a trumpet player with the Boston Symphony and Boston Pops. And as they toured around the country, he'd go into the MG dealers and he'd say, "Hey, you got T-type parts?" And he'd buy them for pennies on the dollar because the parts guys didn't want them in their parts anymore. Well, maybe they keep rotors and caps and stuff like that, but really deep down parts. So anyway, Jerry's buying those parts and then had his magazine. Abingdon Spares has gone through a couple different owners since then, but they still supply T-type parts. The new guy on the block, and I think Doug's only about 10 years into it, is he runs a great operation, Doug Pelton, from the Frame Up in Phoenix, Arizona. And he has a catalog which has every single TC part, not TD, not TF, just TC. He has every single part. And in 10 years, he's become the world's best supplier of I don't know, the largest. Moss has probably still got him, but he's got a great selection of parts from there. And
He does TDs as well.
does he now? Okay. Well, then
Also knows TAs and TVs. John.
TFs can't be too far behind then. So,
He does TVs too, and some of the unique parts like the reserves valve. He's got a new model that you can replace.
okay,
Otherwise, you have to try to find the cork that you can't find.
you can't find it.
So he's got a lot of good stuff.
So lots of compliments here for Doug Pelton from the Frame Up in Phoenix. If you want to go out of the country, you can go to Brown and Gammons in England. They sell stuff, and MTG out of Ipswich. They also have a lot of T-type parts. And of course, I haven't covered everything, and I haven't covered everybody, but that's the overview of T-types. So it's a passionate group of people that own them. They drive them and have a great time. So anyway, let me open it up here for anyone who's got a question about T-types.
Hey, John, before you move on from the frame, how do you deal with a soft spot in the wooden part? Like, for example, under the door jamb, I just dug out the soft wood, filled it with wood filler, and painted, I think it was wood restorer over it. I mean, I think it was structurally okay, but how do you deal with soft spots?
Well, if you got a spot, for instance, where the door strikers go, and it's just torn up. It's had 80 screws in it.
Yeah.
it's just a mess. Or maybe where the soft top attaches behind the seat. So now you get a 1/2-inch drill. It sounds dangerous, it is. You get a 1/2-inch drill and put a piece of tape
Damn it.
around the drill so you can't push it in too deeply, and drill a hole into the wood where it's all punky, or where you want to put a screw. Put a bunch of wood glue in there and take a 1/2-inch wooden dowel and stick it in there, clamp it in there if you can, and then finish it when you're all done. If it doesn't line up perfectly, smooth, and now you've got a nice fresh piece of wood in there. Because
Yeah, that worked. I've done that before. It worked really well. Specifically though, the piece of wood below the door sill. So what is that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Where the water collects in the door and then drips down into the bottom. I've had soft spots there where I gouged out and refilled it.
whatever works.
So there's no good or bad thing. Just
No, it's the proper thing. You gotta lift the whole body off the chassis, and oh my God, so. And that big piece, that big rail is what, 5 foot long, I think. I mean, it's a long rail underneath there. I guess they're probably 5 foot, but 4 foot long. And it's got a compound curve. It might lie flat, but it's at least curved towards the front of the car. So that's a really difficult piece to attach.
well, I had about a golf ball sized soft spot in that rail, so I just gouged it out and refilled it. That's fine.
Pack it full of whatever you can get. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have some other T-type questions.
Hey, John, I have a question about the gearbox remote.
Yeah,
I recently had mine off, and it seems like it takes me about 2 hours to get it back on. Is there a trick to lining that up?
you got a later one, later 52, 53.
52.
So is it? Do you have to get the the trick is to put it in second, I think second,
Okay.
and because you've got you got to get it down in there. I think you put it in second, and then the little slider will fit it into second. But if you try to get it into all three, I know what you mean. I just did this. I just did Craig West's gearbox twice, I think, and it was just easy schmeezy. But it was. I know the ones that have the extra protrusion that comes out the front for the remote control shift.
Yeah.
I know those are more
Right.
difficult to fit. But I think second gear, I think so that you can get that finger down in there and then slide the thing up into place.
Yeah, I had them all even going across. I guess that was my issue.
I think that will make it easier for you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Or do I mean third gear? Let's see. No, I mean second. Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay.
Good luck. So,
Thanks.
yeah. One of the interesting things about the T-types is that all the internal threads on the engine and gearbox are metric, except the ones that are British Standard pipe. All of them are metric, even though they take British wrenches on the cap size. So they're not the only ones that did that. According to a friend of mine who does a lot of Volvos, Volvo did the same thing. They kept the like a half inch wrench would fit the nut, but the thread was actually an 8 by 1 1/4 metric or something. It can be very confusing unless you know exactly what you're doing.
And of course, the engines are mad metric, which are 1.00 versus 1.25 threads. So they're a finer thread than the 1.25s.
Sounds better when you call it French metric.
Yeah. Well, and they are French metric. It's from the Hotchkiss factory.
Right, right. Do we have any more questions about T-types?
I do have a comment about T-types.
Yeah,
Yeah, we worked on two of them. And I tell you, what a simple car and a sturdy car. The last one we worked on was a Mark II that sat in the field for 33 years. Never saw salt. It was undercover. And we did everything we had to do, you know, new distributor, new wiring. Well, it's a lot more stuff we had to do. But anyway, we got ready to start it. And it wouldn't start. And I touched the carburetor linkage. It was hot. So this car has no ground. Glory crawled under. The ground went from the body to the frame. So I put a big crowbar in there to give it temporary ground. After 33 years, it kicked right off. And so I put the ground on, and the thing ran great. The owner was really happy, and I thought we didn't charge enough money. But they are sturdy. I was very impressed with the Mark IIs.
they are simpler than your riding lawn tractor.
Hey, John, I put a question in the comments here. You can pass it when you get to it, but how do you troubleshoot the fuel low light? And the problem I got right now is I've got probably more than 3 gallons of gas in the tank, but it doesn't, I don't know if the light's bad or the unit's bad. And my wire harness is suspect, so I'm just gonna reroute everything.
Well, let's see. So the first thing you do is take the green with black wire off the fuel sending unit.
Yeah, that's the funny part. These are original wires, and I can't tell the color of any of them.
There's only one back there, so it's that one, the one that goes to the fuel sending unit. You take him off, and if the light goes out when you take it off the fuel sending unit, then you know that the fuel sending unit is stuck. So you wait until you're as low on fuel as you can, drain the fuel out the bottom, and then take the fuel sending unit out of the tank, which can be really dicey. What did we do, Craig? What did we went to the, I think those are like 4 BA or 5 BA screws. And so you can't get those. What in the world did we got some little tiny screws that fit, and they were Allen driven. And so we were able to get up in there and put screws back in place. Normally they're cheesehead screws, and trying to get a blade up between the body and the tank is just, it's all but impossible. But it's possible.
Well, I can live without it, but keep in mind, I've never seen the light on at all, so it could just be a bulb, but I don't know how to verify that.
So you can undo on your dash. You got a TD or a TF?
TF.
The one in the picture behind you, the silver one.
Yeah, greenish.
So anyway, it's just a bulb. You can pull it out from behind the dash if you haven't got that horrid dash panel up underneath there. If you do, you got to wait till some other time. But you can just drop that out and take the bulb out, check the bulb with a test light and the battery, and see if you can get the bulb to light up.
Hey, John, I had an issue with the same kind of thing. Somebody put a fuel filter in line with the fuel line, and that's how they gain ground at the fuel tank.
Yes.
So I just ran an extra ground, and mine works great.
Okay.
I opened up the sending unit and I thought somebody gutted it because there's nothing in there but 2 thin wires.
Yeah. It's just an on-off switch. Just an on-off switch. Yeah. So you can take your 12-volt test light, hook it to the rear bumper, and then touch it to the fuel sending unit while the key is on. And if it lights up, well, when you've got less than 3 gallons, if your test light lights up, you know that the fuel tank does not have a ground. You can add a ground real easily. Not one of the screws that goes around the whole unit, because those elite gas, if you bugger those up, but one of the 4 on the little square panel on the back side of the sending unit, and just take a wire with a ring terminal underneath there and go to a good ground someplace in the back of the car. Go to a good ground and make sure that it's grounded. But thank you. Yes, the fuel tank is grounded by the fuel line, and if that's been sheared, you must add a ground for it to work. Thank you.
Hey, John, what do you recommend for timing on the TD with modern fuels?
I still go with it with 32 degrees before top dead center at full mechanical advance. So you don't have to have a dial back timing light. You don't have to do anything. You can get a dial back timing light and set it at 32 at full mechanical advance, which is when it's running real fast. Or you can make a new mark on your front pulley 1 inch. I think it's 1.003, but you're using a paint pencil, which is several thousandths wide, but it's 1 inch ahead of the existing mark. That's 32 degrees. I calculated it on the diameter of the X-Pag front pulley. It's 1 inch ahead is 32 degrees. That's when it's running. But when it's not running at all, you set the timing just like the workshop manual says, 0. So you roll it around until the timing mark is at the pointer, and then turn the distributor until the point's just open. And the workshop manual's got a method of doing that, using a test light, not disconnecting anything. When the point's open, the test light comes on, counterintuitive. Or you can disconnect the line from the distributor to the coil and use your test light between something hot and the distributor. Turn the distributor clockwise, hold the rotor clockwise, turn the distributor clockwise until the light just goes out. That means the points are just breaking, and that's 0 static. The advance weights in that distributor, the 40162 distributor on the TD, it advances 16 degrees, distributor degrees, which are half crank degrees. So it advances 32 degrees. The distributor is designed to advance 32 degrees from 0. So you set it at 0 static. Just the easiest way in the world to do it. Test light, just you do it, bam, you're done. And then you know it's all right. There are 3 different cams that show up within the T-type distributors: symmetric, asymmetric, and high lift. And the point the point gap changes. I think the symmetric and asymmetric, you're looking at a point gap of around 12 thousandths, but the high lift you're looking at 15 thousandths. And sometimes you look at the distributor and you go, well, which do I have? The asymmetric's easy. That one looks like somebody put it on a grinder in their garage and screwed it up. It's just a weird looking. It's not regular at all. It's asymmetric. The symmetric cam is almost a circle, but the high lift cam is common with all the other cams all the way up to about 1980, and it's got a very pointy lobe on it. So anyway, and those take a 15 thousandths gap. So you set the gap before you set the timing, and you only set the gap when the distributor's out of the car. You can't do it in the car, not carefully. So always do that stuff outside the car. Just pay attention to put the distributor back in the same way you took it out, with the rotor pointed exactly in the same spot, and then your cap and wires will be correct. So that was a long answer, sorry.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, John,
Yes.
back to this first question I had. I don't know if you can see this chart I have here. Probably not in focus. You might have seen one before.
Lubrication chart, yeah.
All right, interestingly, on the T chart, back to the points here: front spring anchorage, steering kingpin, steering drag link, blah, blah, blah. It calls for oil, gear Castro Swan Shot gear oil. Now, if I take the T, or just the TC one, it then calls for grease.
I would use grease.
I assume you don't have an answer, but something to think about if you ever come up with.
I'd use grease. On the Silver Ghost, the Rolls Royce that came out, in what, 1915, 1917? How could it come out during the war? But anyway, it had 99 lubrication points, all of which were supposed to be oiled weekly. So anyway, but grease is just a little thicker oil. Grease will be fine.
Hey, John, on the front end of my MGTD, I had to buy a used set of swivel pins for the
Okay.
one side. How do I assess that those are not too worn?
Well, take the distance pieces out and then run the brass trunnions, whatever you want to call them, off the end of the kingpin.
Right.
And then if you got the stub axle with a kingpin in it, sight along the kingpin so that you're sighting down. I just happen to have my roll of paper here. It's not toilet paper. It's a kitchen paper. Anyway, sight this way and see if it's bent. And see if it's bent one way. Turn it 90 degrees. See if it's bent the other way.
Well, mine was, that's why I replaced it. Yeah.
Real easily. And then the trunnions shouldn't wobble when they go on. You know, how much wobble? Well, if you can feel, I mean, there's always a tiny amount of play, always, in anything that goes together. But if it's more wobbly than that, and it's usually the kingpin that wears.
That's my next question, yeah.
You can see the rust and the damage that's been done.
Yeah. Okay.
More questions about T-types? Then we'll get into the chat section.
I have a question, John.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on replacing the rubber in the front end? My rubber's all dried out on the suspension. And so what do you think about just replacing the straight rubber as it is or going polyurethane for some of the pieces, and which pieces?
This is on a TD.
Yeah, this would be on a TD.
Okay, all right. So yes, I'd use the polyurethane A-arm bushings. Never use the original ones. They're awful, horrid. The next upgrade is the MGB GT V8 bushings. Those are better than the original bushings. But then either the red or the black, I think there's maybe purple ones too. You got to smear them with the silicone grease that comes with it, or they'll squeak. I had my knee on somebody's car this past week, bouncing it up and down. It's going ee. You know, it's just embarrassing after you do all that work. Make sure that you get that done. And then the rack boots, I have no substitute except for the ones that you get from the major suppliers, nor do I have any substitute for the kingpin bushings. But Doug Pelton, if Doug Pelton's doing TD stuff, he may have the kingpin seals. That would be nice. That would be nice, because sometimes some of the other suppliers have trouble with the quality of the rubber. And that's frustrating to put it on and then have it fail 3 years later or 5 years later, when the original lasted more or less, for 50 years. So,
John?
Yeah.
I've been buying the trunnion seals and the swivel pin seals from Declan Burns in Germany. He has them 3D printed in some sort of material that doesn't rot.
Okay.
And it's about $45 for a whole set, I think. But really good guy, Declan Burns. And you can find him on the MG Experience.
BURNS?
Yes. There's also a woman who is printing only the trunnion seals, 3D printing those also with a similar material on the MG Experience, but doesn't do the swivel pin seals.
Okay. Okay, very cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was unaware of that.
One other thing about those, the ones that Declan does, he does the ones that you have to disassemble the whole front suspension to put them on, but he also makes types that are split, so you can use safety wire to put them on, or little tiny bolts and screws to attach them. So you don't have to disassemble the whole front suspension to do your seals.
Oh, nice. How nice. How
That
nice.
sounds fantastic.
Okay.
Stay on the
And
road
you
that
can
way.
just ask, you can just email him, once you find his email address, or maybe I can put it up on the chat and
Yeah.
you can share
Yeah.
that.
Fred, that'd be very kind. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
So we're still going for T-type questions.
My TF had the rack and pinion suddenly get really stiff. And so I bought the replacement rack and pinion. And is there anything I should know about when I install that?
When you go to put the new rack and pinion in, there's a clover leaf on the pinion. And you don't know where that clover leaf is supposed to be. So you want to install it with that loose and pull your steering column up away.
Okay.
And then put the clover leaf on and get the wheel so that once your front wheels are straight. See, how can I've got such a tight, anyway, once the front wheels are straight, you want to have the MG motif straight up, or have the wheel the way you want it. And in that clover, once you tighten down that clover leaf on the pinion, on the rack and pinion, on the original ones, it just doesn't come off again. You got to use a great big friggin' puller on it. So that's what to watch out for.
Okay.
I seem to remember having trouble getting that whole front pinion in without glide wire wheels, so I could stick it through the spokes of the of one of the sides. But when I replaced mine, it seemed to be the wire wheels helped me get the whole assembly in there. I just stick it through.
There is, in the TD workshop manual, AKD 660, isn't that it? There's a very detailed explanation of how to do it, and if you follow it step by step, there it is. They won't tell you about the clover leaf. They'll tell you how to separate it and how to pull it from one side or the other, because there isn't a lot of room up there. That is for sure.
Hey, John, before we leave T's, let me give a real quick story.
Yeah.
It's Judd. The day that I took my car on delivery, and I took a friend around the local rural roads. We were about half a mile from the house when the clutch pedal just dropped to the floor. And of course, I knew nothing about T-Series. Hell, I barely knew anything about cars. And we stopped, pulled off the road, walked back up the road, and were able to find the little nut that holds the clutch release rod. Not only that, somebody had dropped a 7/16 nut driver on the side of the road, and I just happened to find that, and it was close enough. It fit the nut. We were able to put the thing back together. I bought a new clutch rod from one of the big suppliers, and it was kind of a piece of crap. So just to echo what Fred was just saying, Declan Burns makes a really, really exquisite set of rods to operate the T-Series clutch, and I put those on. They're just excellent. And lastly, I will ditto you on keep the nuts tight. I got rid of the oil bath cleaner and have just dry cleaner similar to a TF. One of the little screws in the middle that holds it came loose, sucked into the through the carburetor, through the manifold, into the number 3 cylinder. Made the worst noise you ever heard in your life. And I ended up doing, a whole new head job and new piston and all kind of stuff. So you check those little things every now and then. But still love the TD, drive it every day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's, yeah. Yeah. So I didn't mention, because this isn't about service, it's just sort of an overview of T-types. But the TC and the TF have a wire mesh in the air filter that does not work unless you put oil on it. So the TD is an oil bath air cleaner. It's just the best air cleaner in the world for getting clean air into the engine. But the TD and the TF have wire mesh, but it doesn't work unless you oil it.
Motor oil or just WD-40?
Motor oil. Motor oil.
What-
And it's just a mess. It's just that, you know, you oil it and it drips down underneath. You want to use a roll of towel or something or other underneath the air cleaner just to catch the extra that's dripping out, unless you don't mind. But it's going to drip on the frame and the body and the exhaust manifold and on your floor and so forth.
John,
what's
just to
funny
follow
is,
up on that, during the repairs after I got the head redone, the picture I'm showing there is our TA carburetors. They don't have any facility for an air cleaner. I
No,
had to borrow those because mine were off being repaired, and I put them on for one of our big car shows here and drove about 2,000 miles. They work great. And that's a lovely thing about belonging to a club. I just put out a request. Anybody got an extra pair of carburetors I can borrow? And bingo.
Yeah, the TA actually does have an air filter that goes onto those round horns, but they're just little clamps that hold it on. But what's interesting is on the TC, the factory had a service note to say drill 4 holes in the bottom of your intake manifold for your air input to make it run smoother. Of course, that defeats the whole purpose of having an air filter. But I guess later on they say you can fill those in now if you want.
you know, I did a set of carburetors this past year, and the guy I did them for said these don't look, because they were sort of randomly drilled, and he said these don't look original. I said I know I've seen them before, but yeah, I couldn't imagine why they were there. It just didn't make any sense. Any more T-type questions?
Yeah,
Ron?
John, I had one more question.
Sure.
Jim again. My car obviously is all apart, but when I took the gas tank off, it was in really good shape, except the edge of the tank where it meets the back board there. There were a couple of holes, and I was looking at maybe just since it doesn't really have to stop a leak, you just got to fill the holes. I was thinking about using JB Weld for gas tanks. I'm just wondering if anybody has had experience with that and it seems to work okay. Or would you have any other suggestion for patching those 2 holes without cutting a big hole in my tank?
You never get a flame anywhere close to your tank unless you know exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, it's just a bomb.
Well, it's been empty for years, but yeah.
But I don't know whether JB Weld stands up against gasoline or not. I don't know. The people who would know would be
John?
who sells all this, Eastwood, somebody like that, or Rio's Garage or something.
Well, I know Wayne Carini used it on one of his shows. It was 4 fuel tanks.
Okay, all right.
This is Barney, can you hear me?
Yeah, Barney.
Yeah, JB Weld is the cat's meow for fuel tanks. Works absolutely wonderful. I've patched several of them with them. They never leak.
Barney should know.
Even if they're a little rusty, Barney. I mean, I don't know what the inside, it could be a little rusty inside, but just patch those holes, let it go.
Yeah, the tanks typically rust from the outside. You want to get a little Scotch-Brite wheel and polish them or something.
Yep.
Get any dirt off the outside and get it clean enough. Just smear the JB Weld on there. If you got some little Swiss cheese holes, squeeze it through the holes a little bit like you would Bondo or something.
Yep.
And get the stuff to stick. Just smear it around with your finger like cake frosting and let it set up, and it's good for a lifetime.
Yeah. As I said, it's on the top of the tank, so it's not really going to be preventing a leak. I just want to fill those holes.
That'll do it. JB Weld is perfectly impervious to gasoline.
All right, great.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm gonna move over to our chat section now. And the first question up we have has to do with a 72 MGB with 150,000 miles on it with an intermittent problem. Those are the worst problems. It's so hard. If the left turn signal works, the right will not work. When I take the steering column off, I can test the terminals on the turn signal switch, and they have power using a trouble light tester. After fiddling with the terminals and the turn signal switch, the turn signals will both work again. However, when I replace the cowling, they revert to taking turns of not working. I've replaced the hazard warning light switch. If the hazard warning light switch is faulty, neither one will work. And the turn signal switch. My belief is that I may have a ground problem. Any thoughts? Well, I would snap the hazards on and look at the front of the car and then look at the rear of the car and watch the lights flashing on hazards. And if one side appears to be dimmer than the other side, then there's a problem with the ground. It's really common up front. The lamp housings are grounded to the front fenders, but you know that stuff can get rusty. So almost always the problem lies in the front end, not the back end. Almost always, not always. But why these things work back and forth, I don't know. I can't, Jim, I can't dial in any specific problem. It doesn't. It's not the hazard switch. It's not the flasher. I can't believe it's the switch, not after you've changed the switch and you still have the problem. But you've got the problem until you put the cowling on. That's kind of bizarre. So so that makes me think that yeah, the problem is up there in the housing. Remember, those wires are supposed to be follow the steering column real tightly. Use black electrical tape, PVC tape, and get those wires tight against there. Some of the new switches, of course, are not satisfactory. But snapping the hazards on lets you know if the lights on the corners work, because that sends a signal out to all four of the corners. And you can use a test light between your bumper and the housing that is the turn signal housing. And of course, when it's winking and you've got a test light on the housing, the test light shouldn't wink because you're going from ground to ground. But if it does wink or glow, then you know there's a problem with the ground. When something weird happens, it's off in the ground, but the grounds are not up in the column. They're out at the edges, either the fronts or the rears. So I haven't answered your question at all, but when something weird happens, that's my rule on electrics. When something weird happens, it's a ground, faulty ground.
That'll take care of it. That gives me somewhere to go.
Hey, yeah, and then you can call me too, you know, and I can see if I can help you out a little bit more. So, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Jim Simino, I just purchased a CSI distributor for my TD. I don't know what that is. I don't know what CSI is. Do you have any suggestions on plug wires? But this is Jim Simino. You've got CSI. Is that like a capacitance discharge or something? We don't know. Jim's not answering. But if it's anything electronic, you want to use resistor wires.
John, that's a Dutch-made programmable fancy distributor. I've got it on my TD because I destroyed my stock one, and I used normal resistor wires that I got at Napa. But I think Jim just came on, so I'll shut up.
Okay, you want to use resistor plug wires for sure. the solid plug wires, electronic ignitions don't like those. I had 2 Pertronics fail in 2 weeks because I insisted on keeping my solid plug wires.
So just a set of resistance wires would be good then.
Yep. Yeah, you'll be all right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Bob M, to everybody, my TD choke pulls very hard. Any ideas to make it easier? Yes, I've got 2 excellent ideas. Bob, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, so is it a new cable or an old cable?
No, well, yes and no. The old cable off the dash has a little bit of a convoluted run to the linkages for the choke. And so I moved the cable into the glove box to get a straight run directly to the linkages,
Okay,
thinking I would take any play out of that cable. That still didn't improve it, and it's not in the linkages, so it must be something in the 2 carburetors. That's what I'm guessing.
okay, so there's a bunch of stuff. You ought to be able to grab that rod that goes between the 2 carburetors with
Right.
your hand and pretty easily move it to the rear. What does pretty easily mean? It should be pretty easy. I mean, you're pulling it with a cable. So if that's a problem, then pull it out and squirt oil up around on the jets and run the thing back and forth about 100 times and just make him behave. Make him
Okay,
and oil all the linkage points. That'll help. The next thing is that the outer sheath on the cable, if it's too long, you can end up trying to pull just horribly, and it won't do it. So if you've got any outer sheath that's extra in length, that's a problem. Another thing
go
is
ahead.
cable abutment. So right now you've got this clamping device, right? It's supposed to clamp the thing.
Right.
It's stupid. Anyway, a cable abutment for an MG, you look in the Moth catalog for an MGB choke cable abutment is what you want. And that takes the outer sheath. It's got a 3/16 pin that comes off at 90 degrees to it. And you can put a split pin through that and use that instead of that clamping device.
Okay.
And then the cable is fixed, absolutely fixed. I love doing that. It's not original. Oops, points off, but it works. So that's it. And the reason I asked if it was an original cable or not, I just had Craig West's car, and both his cables were original, but they spalled on the end, and so we heated up the cable and withdrew the wire, the flex inner cable.
Right.
Sent one of the guys, John Clark, down to the bicycle store, and he bought a great big spool of inner cable, bicycle brake cable, and we soldered that in to the old cable. And now we got a nice cable, put grease on it, put it all back together, and made sure the length was correct, and it works just effortlessly. So
All great suggestions. Thanks very much. 3 good ideas.
in
Appreciate it.
the end, when your arm is no longer strong enough, I mean, that happens too. When your arm isn't strong enough, then you put a T-handle choke cable in there. Ooh, it looks horrible, but let me tell you, it's really nice. You put 2 fingers on it and you pull it out. You don't have to grab a little tiny knob. We did that for Lorna. She had a TR3. She was 90, still driving this TR3. And she said, I just haven't got enough strength in my arm to pull that little tiny cable out. So we put a T-handle on there, and then she could pull it out. Maybe she had to use 2 arms, but she could still get it out. So those are some hints.
Appreciate it. Thank you, John.
Yes, sir. So, yep, Judd, got the, Judd says he bought Napa wires and they were grotesquely too long. Yeah, but you can always cut the wires down, so. And Marty's got a bunch of stuff here on stuff that's real handy. Let's see. Doug to everybody, Doug Clark and the Hot Nuts were a popular band in the 1950s at Southern US college parties. Yes, Hot Nuts, yes. Yeah, they were always rude to the girls in the front row. I remember them.
Yeah, John, the lyrics of that group, you know, are very tame compared to the lyrics nowadays in some of these rap hip hop songs. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
the,
well, sure.
the
but-
Hot Nuts, they specialize in kind of limericks in their songs, you know, the 5-verse limericks. So that was their kind of that was their well-known trademark. So I don't think any of the members are still living, but yeah, that was you mentioned that the guy lost some hot nuts in his engine driving back from the GOF. So but yeah, that's a blast from the past, that band.
Okay,
Papa loop, papa wop, pop, bam, here come the hot nuts, but don't give a damn.
yeah, there we go. Yep. All right, Charlie to everybody. Any truth to the old story that the TF toolboxes were made out of surplus British ammo boxes? They sure look like that, but they were made, they also looked like that before the war. So my guess is that the same people that were making ammo boxes were making the toolboxes, maybe. And then they incorporated them, but I don't know. I don't know that story. That I always say that because they do. They look like an ammo box, you know, 7.62 rounds or something, or maybe for your M1. I don't know, but they sure do look like ammunition boxes. But I think there probably were more things made that look like that, but I don't know. Pat Garrity, oh, thank you. Pat Garrity says TC gearboxes use 140 and not 90 weight gear oil. Thank you very much, Pat. Pat Garrity, you're still on?
Still here, John.
From California. So I wanted to thank you for your package with the needles in it, the carburetor needles that I finally opened up about 2 weeks ago and found that there weren't just needles, but there was a key fob and there was a picture of me with my daughter's car, all kinds of stuff in there. So anyway, I hadn't sent you a personal note yet. I wanted to publicly acknowledge your gift. Thank you very much.
That was your stuff from the GOF.
Yep. Thank you.
And one more thing, somebody was talking about putting 140 in the steering box. Doug Pelton has a much better lubricant.
Okay.
Than the 140.
Okay.
It is the thickest, gooeyest grease or oil I've ever seen in my life. But good stuff.
Actually, your suggestion is good because I used a Land Rover swivel axle grease in my TC steering box. It won't run out like oil will.
Right. Yep. And TC boxes leak.
Yeah, that sector shaft goes on through those bushings. I mean, all the forces on that thing are just wrong, and
Yep.
all they do is want to leak.
Yeah,
So
a lot of guys are putting VW boxes on, but I'm enough of a purist. I just couldn't do it.
Yep.
So I had Doug go through my box.
We used to put a lot of grease into them and then put some oil in on top of that, figuring that we'd make up some of this special grease. You know, you had to have enough grease in there so the oil wouldn't run out. But he figured the oil would finally mix with the grease. So yeah. And Pat Garrity also says the later generators have an oiling hole at the rear of the on the CE and the commutator end. The Lex sheet, the Lucas Tech sheet says just 1 squirt of motor oil to lube the rear bushing. Don't know how often that is, but as often as you think about it. if you look at the rear of those later dynamos, they say oil on them, and there's a hole right there. But of course, you'd never see it because the oil filter's in the way, or like on an MGA, and the oil filter or the distributor's in the way. You just would never see it, but it's right there. So, yep. So Marty Bradley's got Craig Seabrooks, the Whitworth Shop on Watt Road, Novelty, Ohio. We've got that information we got from the frame up. And here we got Abingdon Spares. The number displayed is the former Connecticut number. Ed Cook is correcting us on that. Ed Cook was still with Abingdon Spares. Thank you. And Abingdon Spares has T-type sender 3BA screws and cheese head or Allen head. So you don't have to rethread and use something from the hardware store. You can order from Abingdon Spares and get an Allen head 3BA screw. I love it. So, and Charles has said, how do you troubleshoot a low fuel light on the TF? Well, we talked about that. By taking the wire off, that's one way, grounding it, and the light on the dash should come on. So if that works, then you know that the sending unit is faulty, or you don't have ground to the T-type gas tank. So since you always do the cheapest, easiest, simplest stuff first, take your test light from the rear bumper. That's always a really good ground, the chrome on that. And touch that test light to the fuel sending unit when the ignition is on, and the light is supposed to be on, meaning that you got far less than 3 gallons. So if the test light lights up, you've got a problem with the ground. And this is what yep. And Pat Garrity's got over in the chat, just the same thing that I just said. I didn't know it was there. John Tershak, if you have a small spot of rot in your wood, you can use a product called Get Rot Boater with wood boats. I've used this for years for repairs. I've used it in the past. The longest time on a wood repair was in '71 when I used it to repair a wood header in my Model A, and it's still going strong after all these years. You drill small holes in the wood, inject the wood rot into holes. The rotten wood will absorb the get rot. When it doesn't take any more, you put sawdust in the wet hole and the wood becomes hard as a rock. So anyway, so boating stuff is good for us too. G-I-T, get rot. And here we've got Steve Back has got a note in here with a link, a very long link. So.
Sorry, John, it's an Amazon link, but
It's okay.
I've used it on my boat and it works great.
Okay.
It's not fun if you're doing it from underneath though. It dribbles on you, so it's gonna be a mess for a little bit.
Okay.
Good stuff. And wear gloves on any epoxy, including JB Weld, because you don't want to get sensitized to it. And if you do, then you'll never be able to work with it ever again.
Okay, all right. So that comes up on Barney's comment too about the gas tank repair. Thank you.
Yep.
Steve, thank you. So Tom,
I would second that, because all the boat guys say for small spots of rot you want to fix, use an epoxy product.
Okay. Get rot. Hey, that's wonderful. Thank you. That's we've seen lots and lots of T-types with lots and lots of rust. So that's real kind. So Tom, everybody, any tips for pulling the wiring loom through the firewall? Oh my gosh. The way that we did it on Craig's car a couple weeks ago was to give up on trying to pull it through the grommet. So we put the wiring loom through first, cut the grommet, and then laid the grommet in afterwards. Craig was putting in a cloth loom with cloth wire. So it's just larger than the original. I think that's the problem. It's just larger than the original wiring. The PVC wiring with a PVC wrap, I don't think there's a problem using it. You can always use Vaseline, just to make stuff slip through, or the automotive Vaseline, which is Silglide from Napa. I think this is only my second mention of Napa. I said I was going to mention it 48 times. I don't know. Anyway, and Fred Horner.
It looks, sorry, John,
Yeah.
it looks like some of the wires go through the hole and then you have to pull them back through the hole because of the way they exit the large part of the loom. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what's making it difficult.
What year model are you working on?
It's a 52 TD.
Oh yeah, right there at the control box in that great big hole. Oh yeah.
And then there's a directional relay with 8 connections on the inside of the firewall that you have to take the wires back through to.
Craig's car, we just couldn't get that through. Yeah, it's supposed to be covered on the bottom side of the toolbox.
Yeah, right.
But we gave up, and I mounted it just below. Yeah, I'm getting seasick watching you here.
All right.
Funny. We mounted it just below the battery tray, just behind the engine. So it's not original.
Okay.
Not where it's supposed to go,
Yeah.
but it was the only place it fit.
That might work. And water on it's not a problem.
Well, there's going to be a whole lot of water on it there. So
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thanks.
Here we got Declan, DECLAN, Declan Burns. Thank you, Fred, for putting that in. So that's a place probably for not just that. Probably he's got some other stuff too. So, oh boy, here we got Dusseldorf. We even have his phone number and his email address. Thank you very much. Okay, Brent, here we go. The horn on my 72 MGB only works when the steering wheel is between 1 and 2 o'clock on right-hand turns. Installed a new horn brush and cleaned with electrical contact cleaner, but it still isn't working. So, Brent, are you still on? You waited all this time to get an answer? So the way to get this sorted out on the 72B is to take the column covers off, take the switches off, and then there's a little finger that rides on the back of the horn brush. It'd be easier actually to take the steering wheel off, and then you can clean everything up and put it all back together nice and clean. But that's what's going on, is that this horn brush on the back side, and not the horn brush that looks like a ballpoint pen with a spring inside it and the brass ends that goes between the horn push and through the steering wheel, but the back side of the steering wheel, that's what needs to be cleaned up. We just did that on, whose car did we just do that on? Someone's car. John Clark? There was this aftermarket steering wheel, and it wouldn't follow, it wouldn't cancel. Yeah, I think it was that. And it was a lot of hocus pocus, but we had to get the wheel off and then make it work.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'm not starting work tomorrow until about 10:30. So I'll text you. Steve Shupak, MGB question. I'm trying to time my car, and when I advance the light, to the proper amount, it bounces between 0 and 20 degrees. Is that a symptom of too much dwell, or what should I look at? So Steve Schupak, are you still on?
I'm here.
Okay, so the distributor, it idle, it'll bounce around a lot, but up
Yeah,
it's,
this is going from like 0. So I'm trying to set it at 0 with the advancing the light, and then but it's going down below like 20 degrees. So it goes to 20, 0, 20, 0, 20, 0.
and you're using a dial back light?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Well, maybe there's something up with that light.
Anon. Well, it's a brand new was it Anon?
Okay,
Digital. Yeah.
okay. You clip it out. Clip
Quick
it out.
question, is it a new distributor cap?
Brand new distributor and distributor cap. And
Clip it
wires.
on, clip it on the number 4 wire instead of the number 1.
Okay. Okay.
And just see if it's doing the same thing. Because it's 1 and 4 are firing at the same time. I mean, not at the same time, but 360 out, so.
Last time I saw this happen, it was a faulty distributor cap. The center brush had too much resistance. And so it was finding its own path.
Right.
You know, so you might try a different distributor cap or just measure the resistance of the center electrode.
Okay. All right. I'll check that out. Yeah, because they just put in a new 25D distributor with brand new caps. So I'm assuming
What year do you have, Steve?
71.
Okay, well, you can static set that at 71. You can static set that at probably 10 or 12.
Yeah, I got it from Rob Medeski, so he said static it at 10.
Okay, all right. So just use a test light and use static at 10. That's because he's giving you a 12 degree advance on the distributor, which is 24 on the crank. 24 plus 10 is 34, should be 32. So he must be giving you just a little, maybe a little less advance on the distributor. So anyway, that'll get you really, really close. But I don't, you got the idea that the faulty part here, or it's switching over to the number. And you can always put a mark on the opposite side of the pulley, just with a paint pencil, about opposite, and then watch that on 2 and 3, not to time it, but just to see if it's doing the same thing. So if it's common to all 4 spark plugs,
oh, got it. Yeah,
then it's common to the rotor and center cap.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I got a comment about the digital setback, the timing lights that Steve was talking about. They're very particular about what type of spark plug wire they run. I had to get a wire from a Camaro or something and put it on because mine was jumping all over the place until I don't remember whether it's a resistance or a non-resistance, but it's in the instructions of mine anyway. It's very specific, so that could be his problem.
That is probably the problem. Thank you.
And I think I'm running non-resistor.
No, then it won't work.
So I need resistor wires.
You need resistor wire for that inductive pickup to work. Yes. And you don't have to run it. You can just substitute a wire. Substitute the number 1 or number 4 wire temporarily with an old one. It is a resistor wire. If you got an ohm meter, anything above 2,000 ohms is a resistor wire. Anything above 0 is a resistor wire. But usually you'd expect to find 5,000 to 7,000 ohms in those wires.
Hang on. So I did. Okay, because I did change the wires recently, and I forgot what they were coming in at. But they were so high resistance the car stopped. So then I got new wires and the car lit right off.
Okay.
So I'd have to look them up and see what I bought. But that's helpful. Good to look at.
Okay, you've got some places to go then. So
yeah.
Okay.
Back to the garage.
Yeah. Okay.
John, one last comment. You are the Julia Childs of MG Auto Repairs. And I say that in the highest esteem as a compliment.
That's very kind, very kind.
I'll never forget that statement.
Yeah, that was last week when we were talking about cooking on the engine, you know? So let's see. So Jim Borkman says my 1978 blinker won't turn the turn signal off. How do I fix that? So Jim, are you on right now? Can you expand on this? Jim Borkman?
It won't cancel.
Okay, all right. So you have to take the steering wheel off the car, turn the, my guess is that it will cancel if you turn it more than about 180 degrees.
Oh, I see.
It probably will. And the problem is that those turn signal switches are set up for left and right hand drive. And the controls are on opposite sides on a British car, uses the same switch. So the canceller, there's two slots in the canceller, and then there's a line and that line should be at 9 o'clock when you put the steering wheel back on. So pop the wheel off. You cannot take the wheel off the car without two people. I just talked to somebody this weekend. Can't remember who it was. Yeah, I tried to get my wheel off and I couldn't get it off, and I was real mean. I said, "Were you using two people?" "Well, no." I said, "Well, what's my video say?" Two people. You got to have two people, otherwise you're going to wreck stuff. So anyway.
Well, I had it off. I probably messed it up when I put it back on.
Well, yeah, but you take it off, turn that adjuster 180 degrees, the canceller, turn it 180, and that'll solve it.
All right, take a look at it. Thank you.
Yep, just did that last week. Walter Ocon, John, you recommended resistance plug wires. What about using solid plug wires with a resistance plug connector? You know, I guess that does the same thing, but to get the dial back timing light to work correctly, you've got to use resistor wires. That's my experience. And you know, to make the car run, you can use anything. You can use resistor wires, you can use straight wires, but if you want that dial back light to work, you've got to use a resistor wire. That's my experience. The MGAs use those, and that was for, I think, radio suppression, because you get that AM radio from the radio frequency from the engine operation, and it's supposed to mute that. So
MGAs use the resistor in the spark plug terminal.
yes, yep, that's what I was trying to say, and that's a 9,000. A lot of the replacement ones you buy are either open or they're straight through. It's hard to find them with that 7,000 ohms in them. Brad Schwartz, oil pressure on a recently rebuilt engine is 50 at startup, but drops to 20 at road speed when the engine's hot, using 2050 Valvoline VR1. What are some possible things to check? So, Brad, are you on, or can you talk?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So what year and model?
Well, it's a Friends Sunbeam Alpine.
Oh,
just a generic question.
We don't answer those questions. Is that an electric gauge or a mechanical gauge? Do you have any idea?
It's a mechanical gauge.
All right. So there's a flexible line that goes between the engine and some intermediate thing. Take the flexible line off the intermediate connection on the firewall, and put it into a bottle or a can, a clear glass bottle. Start the car up and see if the oil's aerated. Just see if it's aerated. I mean, it's either full of bubbles or it's not. If it's full of bubbles, that will account for low oil pressure, and that shows up as because you've got you're sucking air in along with the oil at the oil pump. Now, on an MGB, that's not unheard of. There's some mistakes you can make on a B engine where you can't get oil pressure at all. And then there are other ones, if you leave the oil pump loose, for instance. And I remember one I worked on, a T-type a couple of years ago. The pickup had a couple different gaskets along the way. One of the gaskets was misplaced, not by much, and it wanted to suck air in along with the oil. And of course, it goes through the oil pump and gets all that air in there, and all the air compresses. So you just can't get good oil pressure. So that would be the first thing that I'd go for, is just see if the oil's aerated.
Okay, we'll check it out. Thank you very much.
And you can call me too, because I mean, engines are engines, but you can call me during the week or something. I'm more than happy to answer what I can.
Okay, we'll check that. Thank you.
Even though it's a Chrysler product, yeah.
No, this is pre-Chrysler.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So Dwayne Schmidt says the TC steering box oil from Doug Pelton, and there's a link to it. Lee Gilbert, I missed the long distance driving last week. Has that one been loaded online yet? No, I'm embarrassed, but I will. How's that? I always promise that I will, and then I don't. But Lee, I will do what I can. That was really good. We had Terry and Carol Luft and Bob and Gloria Cook and Barney. Barney's got 680,000 on his MGA. Cook's have got 540, and the Lufts always are driving different cars, but their aggregate mileage is dramatic too. So, oh my gosh, yeah, there's lots of hints about packing and cooking. That was one of the good ones. Cooking on the road. So I am through all the questions tonight on chat. So my goal tonight was to give back to the T-type owners something, because we haven't had a lot of T-type talk lately. So I thought, well, if we feature the T-type, we'll get some more T-typers on here. I do recognize some that aren't on all the time. So anyway, thank you for coming on. And it's 9 o'clock. So I think what we'll do is wrap it up tonight a little early. Sometimes they go till 9:45. Tonight, we're barely touching 9 o'clock, but it's a pleasure. And thanks to everybody for being here and participating. I'll make my begging statement again. You know, if you feel the need, the duty to go to my one of my websites and make a PayPal donation, it will be publicly acknowledged. So thank you very much. So
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Hey,
Thank you very much, John.
I'm going to switch
Thanks,
over
John.
to a gallery view and see who's here, because I never get to see who's on when I'm talking. So Jeff, thank you for being here, Tom Snook. Doug Miller, good luck with you. Did you find those pieces or not?
I have found everything except one nut, and I'm pulling the head this week to get a better visual, and cross my fingers, say a prayer, go to church, go to mass.
So you've got that borescope. You went down inside there. Is the top of the pistons all beat up or what?
Through the endoscope, they look pretty good.
Well, why take it apart? Just put plugs in it and start driving it.
I'm not that risky.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, all right.
Somebody by the name of John Twist told me that a few years ago.
Okay, all right.
Hey, John, I want to say I got more questions about cooking on the engine. And there's a book somebody got me after they found out I was cooking it. It's called Manifold Destiny. The only problem is with our MGs, you can't get to the manifold, so you cook it on the side of the engine block, which doubles the recipe. It says 2 hours, you cook for 4.
Okay.
You drive for 2 hours, you stop in a rest area, flip it over, and then have to tell people, no, I'm not having engine trouble, I'm just cooking dinner. And the looks we get are kind of strange.
Manifold
it's fun.
Destiny, that's pretty good, okay.
Yeah, somebody bought us that book. I don't really use it much because we don't have a lot of space to cook a lot of fancy things, but 3 layers of aluminum foil and then whatever you want to put in, whatever kind of meat.
And be careful around the alternator.
Yeah, we put it behind the dipstick and the alternator. Aluminum foil, don't, yeah.
Okay, all right.
What about bacon? Bob, what about bacon wrapped filet mignon?
Hey, you could probably do that. That might take a little longer.
That's probably the best. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Good idea.
It is your last name, gosh sakes.
So I see Sean English is on. I had a picture of Sean and his YB. Sean,
Yeah.
Pleasure. I'm still planning to come down sometime in the fall, but now I got roped into going up to the West Coast to GOF West.
When is that, John?
October 17th, maybe around there, it's someplace in around Sacramento. So
yeah.
So my daughter moved 2,000 miles away from home, and of course is pining for everybody to come visit her, and only I and her brother have so far because it's so far away.
If
And
you get to Sacramento, go to Old Town, Sacramento.
Okay.
It's great. It's used to be the western terminus of the Pony Express, and very historic. And when they found out there's some historic value, they chased the bums out, and they got cats to chase the rats out, and they put a lot of money into it. And they probably have the best train museum I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my gosh! Well, I've been to St. Joseph, so I've seen the other terminus. How can it have 2 termini? The Pony Express. So yeah, great.
Oh, you'll like, and a lot of eating places, and then typical tourist stuff where they sell you things that are worth about half of what you pay for.
Hey, it's tourist stuff. Pat Garrity, you.
When's the next meeting, John?
Pat Garrity, you going up to GOF West? Do you think in October?
I haven't made up my mind yet, John.
Okay.
That's quite a trek.
How far is that from LA, do you think?
Gosh, from LA.
7 hours.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
It's all of
It's a day's drive.
yeah,
Yep.
I'm used to driving in the truck when I'm doing 85. I don't think I'd want to take the B on I-5 for 6.5, 7 hours doing 85 straight.
You can't do 85 on 5 because of the traffic.
It's a
Well, it
hot
depends on what
drive
time you
too.
go.
High temperatures.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Mind
It'll
is-
be a good event though.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll fly between the spots or something, so. Well, anyway,
Are you having,
for
are you
the
having a
next
meeting in
session.
2 weeks?
So July 8th would be our next.
oh, yes, thank you. July 8th. Now,
Which is before you go to Oregon. So
okay, thank you very much. Anyway, thanks everyone for being on tonight. Doug Clark, did you have a hat tonight? Are you
Yeah, I also, my count was 120.
Okay.
I got 123.
Hey.
But we had a lot
You're
of people.
125, 130, going once, going twice.
There
Yeah,
were-
we can make this an auction, you know?
There were a lot of
Anyway.
people in and out today and we had a lot of new faces. So I counted 137 unique users, but 123 at the peak time.
Okay.
So
Very good. Very good. Yes, John. Well, it's been so hot lately, you know, I'm pretty much all over. It's, so what better thing to wear in hot, humid weather than a ventilated pith helmet? Now, this has, maybe you can see, it's all ventilated all around it.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it was scorching hot the last week or so, and yeah, that's a nice little flat cap, tweed newsboy cap you got on, John.
And not only that, this is.
It's got your name on it. It's your name.
Commercially available hat with my name on it.
Yeah, I remember. They were selling those, I think, at the NAMGIVR convention back in 2019, I think. I remember seeing those. Yes, very good.
Traverse City.
So.
Yes, Traverse City, Michigan.
Okay. That's probably where I got this one, so. Right. Well, anyway, everyone, thank you very kindly. It's a pleasure. And John Clark, Marty, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And we'll
Have a
look
great
forward
night,
to
John.
our next meeting. I just offhand, since I did T-types today, I think maybe we'll focus on MGAs next
Let's do
time.
MGAs next time.
Yeah, I think we'll do MGAs, and then I'll team up here with Barney, and Barney's always got a lot to say about to the A's. So okay.
Oh, we had a new experience this week, John.
What's that?
Had a new experience this week. A week ago Sunday, I hit a deer. So this week we're straightening out the front end of the MGA again.
Hit a deer with an MG. Ooh, 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 ooh.
How's the
Where are
deer?
you?
Well, it's definitely a dead deer.
Where are you right now, Barney?
Oh, we're sitting on the side of a mountain about 4,000 feet
What, Colorado or Wyoming?
north of California Park.
Okay, and you're eventually gonna get up to Welch's, but, well, that's the plan.
Yeah, we're going to be there. We're going to get everything paid for, including a room.
Okay, all right. Okay. Very cool. All right, ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Good
Thanks,
night.
John.
Thank you, John. Thanks a lot, John. Good night, John. Thank you.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.
See you, Marty.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Have a
you.
good 4th of July. Don't forget, if you drive on the 4th, don't drink a 5th on the 3rd.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. See ya.
Something else I won't
You
forget.
do that. Looking forward to seeing you again.